going to get started. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Leaders in Sustainability Speaker Series. This is the final Westchester Green Business event of 2017. It's been a great year. Thank you all for being here. So my name is Scott Fernquist. I'm the co-director of the program along with my partner, Danny Glazer, who's over there, and the whole Green Business team, Meg Curtin. Where's the rest of the team? And Nicole Vergona, our Green Business Associate. So today's topic is green procurement, choosing safer materials for your business, and we're lucky to have some leading experts in this space from New York Sustainable Business Council and Clean and Healthy New York to present in just a little bit. So before we delve into the presentations, I'd just like to ask Marcia Gordon, President and CEO of the Business Council, to say a few words. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Happy December. Happy holiday season. And this is the time of year when we all kind of sit back and evaluate how our year has been, what's coming up the next year. And at the Business Council of Westchester, one of the initiatives that we are truly most proud of is this Green Business Initiative. And Danny Glazer and Scott Fernquist and our partnership with Westchester County, which will continue, is so important. And the support of Con Edison, Jane Skolnick, from the very beginning, this program would not happen without your support, and we thank you so very. Let's give Con Edison a round of applause. So why is this so important to the business community? It's all about, sustainability is about economic development, and it's about business growth, and it's about creating a county where sustainability and good quality of life matters. And we know that that's the number one perspective that companies look at when they come to Westchester, when they stay in Westchester, and more importantly, in this time when it's so hard to hire great talent, and especially young talent, people want to work for companies who care about the environment. And so our Green Business Initiative, with Danny's leadership and Scott's leadership, really has met that challenge. And all of the companies and all of you here who have such keen interest and such commitment really set the standard for Westchester County and for New York State and for the country. So I thank you for your commitment. Thank you for, this seems like a fascinating topic. I look forward to learning more about it. And happy holidays, everybody. Joy.
Jane, it's your turn. Jane Solnick from Con Edison.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, I feel like it's so far away, but you can hear me, right? First of all, I want to say that a lot of people say, Con Edison, you're involved in this. You know, we're all concerned about sustainability. We know that energy cost is a significant issue for a lot of people. We don't want to be building more infrastructure. We want to be improving what we have and doing it in the right way. And we want to help you save costs, believe me. So we do have a lot of programs that people are not familiar with. I encourage you to go to our website. They do change. We are a regulated company, so they can change sometimes on an annual basis. But we have some people that are out at the table in front. I encourage you to stop by and see them. We do have some little giveaways today, so you may want to take it off. So they will remind you of us all the time. But they can direct you to whether it's your home or it's a small business or a large business that you want to take advantage of. So I encourage you to do that and kind of spread the word. We're always trying to spread the word. But I also want to say it's been an honor for us to, we were asked to participate in this from the inception. And it's been a great public-private partnership with the Business Council and the county. And I applaud Danny and Scott for how they've developed it, because we've really seen a lot how many companies have been certified and stuff. So we're honored to be a part of it, and we want to encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. Thanks so much, and everybody have a great holiday.
Thank you, Jane. I'd like to invite up now Jean Maloney, who's the Assistant Dean of Workforce Development and Community Education here at Westchester Community College, to say a few welcoming words.
The shortest person here. So, good morning and welcome to Westchester Community College. It's a real privilege on behalf of our president, Dr. Belinda Miles, to welcome you here to the college. And we're so excited to be supporting this program and salute our colleagues from the Business Council, our colleagues from the county, and all the other partners who put together this program and who really mentor or guide along this initiative. So we think it's particularly fitting that this program be hosted in the Gateway Center, a LEED Gold building that we're proud of, and please take a look at it, enjoy it, we sure do. And this is the first, as many of you know, county-owned green building, so we're very proud of that. So I say this each time I meet with a group. If you have a few minutes to walk around our 200-plus acre campus, we encourage you to do that, interact with our students, ask them some questions, and there's great wildlife that also call Westchester Community College their home. So have a great meeting, a productive meeting, a good weekend, and a wonderful holiday season.
We're just going to take a quick picture really quick before some people have to leave, so just
Yeah.
bear with us 1 second.
Sorry about that. We didn't do this photo. Sorry, Dad.
All right.
Probably want me in the back.
Well, let's have you.
Not me.
Sorry, everybody.
Yeah.
So just that way. Okay, I'm going to go through this briefly because I am so excited to hear what Bobby and Hillary have to tell us about products. It's actually, if you know me, it's something that I really, really enjoy. So just going quickly, we love our little graphic, which represents everything in our program. So the partners who you've been introduced to today, the Business Council, Westchester County, and my company, Green Team Spirit, have developed this program, the founding partners. And we very much appreciate being here at the Legal Gateway Center. We always want to thank our sponsors. So we have 3 platinum level sponsors, Con Edison, NYSERDA, and the Westchester Community Foundation. Regeneron is a gold level sponsor, Silver, Agera, and TD Bank. And we have 8 wonderful bronze level sponsors. And the majority of the sponsors on this slide are certified green business through our program. So we're very, very proud to be able to say that. We're now up to 89 companies. I really kind of can't wait to get to 90. Like, who's going to be the 90th? I've been having a lot of conversations. But what you could see that we have an incredibly diverse group of companies in the program, from a small ice cream store to large hospitals and everything in between, tenants, landlords. But there is a common denominator across all of these businesses because, you know, looking at your energy and waste and water and transportation, how people commute to work, that is common to every single type of business. Very proud of our certified green businesses. We're at 26. Actually, we're smidgens away from 27 because Sustainable Westchester just submitted their documentation and it looks really good. And they will be official certainly by the beginning of next week. So we are a very holistic program where when you join the program, it involves everyone who works in the organization. We're very big on organizational commitment and that it's everybody's job who works for the organization to be a part of this. So, and the really wonderful thing that we have seen is the collaboration between our members. Our members are working together, they're doing business together, they're helping each other, and truly, as they get certified, they are demonstrating to the community that they are leaders and very, very good corporate citizens. So to get certified, there are really 4 steps. As you can see, there's a survey that goes out to all staff.
There's an action list with a very detailed list across all the categories I mentioned. Measuring your greenhouse gas emissions, submitting a presentation, and getting certified. I make it sound really easy. As these are the 7 areas of focus, and today we're very excited to talk about materials management purchasing because it's a very, very important part of this program. It's also one where companies can be very successful because you'll learn about, first of all, what you don't need to buy. So buying less is really one of the first things, and then switching over to green products, and you'll learn today how important that is. Just a few photos reflecting our program, from certification ceremonies to our annual awards ceremony to our fabulous interns. And coming soon, hopefully January, but the whole program is going online. And companies will be able to just go into a dashboard and access the dashboard and input all the data, and it's going to be a big game changer. So, but if anybody's worked with web developers in this room, things don't happen as quickly as you want. So when it's live and ready, you will hear me screaming from the rooftops. You won't miss it. So I would like to, I'm very delighted, and I'm going to have our presenters actually tell us who they are and what you've done. I mean, I read about your incredible accomplishments, and it's just wonderful to have you here. So who's going to speak first? So Hillary Baum, Program Policy Director for New York State Sustainable Business Council, will be speaking to us first. Thank you, Hillary.
Good morning, everybody. Okay. So I'm very pleased to be here. I attended a previous program here, the very last one, and was tremendously impressed with the quality of the program and also the attendance. But I've also heard Danny speak in a smaller setting with the professionals in sustainability group earlier in New York City. So I'm very delighted to be here and think very highly of your program. I am a new resident of Westchester County, and so it is really especially exciting for me to learn about your program and to be with you today. I'm the policy and program coordinator for the New York Sustainable Business Council, but I've also been, until I still am really, an independent producer of coalition building educational programs and public awareness campaigns focusing on food farming and sustainability. I'm actually a former independent business owner, and my background includes artisan food production, marketing, restaurant procurement, farmers markets, and community-supported agriculture. I've always been really interested in businesses that put their values into practice through various aspects of what they do. In fact, I think I would call myself a mission junkie. I spent a long time reading the mission statements of various companies, especially in the food and restaurant business. But one of the real reasons that I'm most happy to be here today is because your group and our group, the New York Sustainable Business Council, share a lot of values. But unlike you, our group doesn't have a certification program, and so, or a really hands-on business program. What we really do is support business, and support policy, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. What we are going to do today is give you a business perspective on procurement, on green procurement, and on reducing chemicals. And we're going to talk about why and how to avoid some of these harmful chemicals. Today I'm here with Bobby Wilding, my colleague and collaborator and partner in this venture, but she's the real expert, so there's no doubt about it. Bobby has a science background and has been involved in the environmental health movement for about 20 years. She leads Clean and Healthy New York's communications efforts as well as many of their programs, and is very active with leading environmental health organizations and environmental justice organizations. She's just come back from an exciting conference on this subject, and I know she has a lot of current information and a lot of enthusiasm about it, which she will share with you. So this slide gives you a sense of where we're headed today. We'll be presenting information that focuses generally on green or sustainable procurement and specifically on harmful chemicals and strategies for finding solutions for their use and proliferation in business. We hope the program will provide encouragement for you to make the commitment to reduce these chemicals in your business, to overcome challenges you may be facing, and to pursue the Westchester Green Business certification or other paths to achieve your objectives. The Westchester Green Business Green Action List is a great guide. I've looked at it, and it's really impressive. It has many resources built right in to get you on your way, but you'll find some complementary tools in what we have to offer you today. In fact, we do have some packets. I hope I have enough. We also have printed out some extra surveys, and we hope you'll be able to take that before you leave. This is really designed as an introductory workshop, but we will be following this workshop with 2 in-depth seminars that will focus on specific business sectors or other topics that will be designed in response to your feedback on this introductory program. I thought it would be helpful to call out the learning objectives for today, and I'm certainly not going to read them, but I want to add number 6, and that would be to be inspired. I forgot to put that on the list. Why is this training important? My understanding is that there are about 80,000 chemicals around us, and only 5 of them are regulated. So we really must increase our knowledge base and be proactive, finding solutions and making safer choices, collaborating with suppliers, and providing transparency to our customers, employees, regulators, and investors. So I heard somebody use the term the other day of the forensic consumer. And I have to admit, I'm kind of one of those people who wants to know everything about what I'm buying, reading every label. But this is somebody really new in the marketplace that we should all know about. So it should be a key part of any sustainable purchasing program to understand which chemicals could pose hazards in products and services, how they might harm users of those products and or the environment, and what safer alternatives are on the market. So our Sustainable Business Council works with leaders in support of policy and programs that enhance triple line economic growth, environmental stewardship, and social progress. We are an affiliate of the American Sustainable Business Council, which consists of about 250,000 small businesses across the country. We represent about 1,800 of them, or 1,600, whatever I put on the slide. Okay. Our business leaders identify with a lot of this language, as I'm sure many of you do. But in our council, our business leaders are most often affiliated with local or regional business organizations or networks, such as the Binghamton Regional Sustainability Coalition or First Local Ithaca, or they have organized around special interests, like, not surprisingly, the Sustainable Enterprise and Entrepreneur Network. All believe that business can be a force for good and that building a sustainable economy is entirely compatible with a healthy environment and society. Our work is really focused on education, educating and mobilize our business leaders to create policy change in support of an economy that works for all. We aim to raise the voice of business, both in the media and in the State House. And over the past few years as an organization, our focus has been on the transition from fossil fuels to renewables, reducing toxic chemicals, and workplace issues. And we have a number of wins in most of those categories, but I guess not a lot in the toxic chemical category. The main focus of our year is our annual Sustainable Business Summit that we hold in Albany. And at that time, We go with business leaders, usually a group of about anywhere from 25 to 40 people. Leaders come with us, and we pay visits on our elected officials. So we work with our businesses and allies to shape our policy agenda for each session, and support that agenda with those visits, both in Albany and home districts. And we also support that agenda by working with our business leaders to provide testimony and hearings, meet with the governor's office and regulators occasionally, and submit op-ed articles and letters to the editors. We've also participated in press conferences with our business leaders, spoken at rallies, and yes, we have been marching. We recognize that business leaders are often too busy to achieve some of the goals of our organization in terms of activity, but we help keep them informed and create opportunities for them to be engaged. So we also work with allies and present the business perspective around specific issues, and we partner with a variety of organizations, including Clean and Healthy New York. This is a list of a lot of the work we've done on toxic chemicals in conjunction with Clean and Healthy. But we've also done some other work, including our ASBC has worked with the Sustainable Furnishings Council specifically to create the What's It Made Of initiative, which is an initiative to help people work and ask the right questions of their suppliers. So I want to get to the heart of this right now, and that is really the business case for sustainable procurement and reducing harmful chemicals, and it really forms the baseline for what we're talking about. Sustainable procurement makes sense for our economy, public health, and the environment. We know that there's increasing demand. Business buyers, government vendors, advocates, and consumers are demanding safer products and transparency in the supply chain. It may very well increase the marketability of your products and of your business, obviously, to be involved with sustainable procurement. It often helps to reduce costs of regulation, helps with hazardous waste disposal and potential liabilities, while it increases worker protection. And what I mean by that, it helps your bottom line in those areas. While some products do cost less, many products right now cost about the same, I guess because of all the demand and all the changes and all the progress we've made so far. But there also may be savings in payroll and benefits, and also the kind of atmosphere that's created in the business is also related to this and helps increase employee retention. So that's a savings too, and certainly an addition, positive addition. We also know that businesses will be better prepared for regulatory compliance if they're really committed to sustainable purchasing. We also know that it spurs innovation in the marketplace and prepares businesses to meet these really increasing market demands. I think one of the most important things is it's really shifting the supply chains. As I mentioned just before, all this demand is making it possible to get a lot more products, which has been good for the suppliers, but certainly also for the buyers. So what we really want to do is change the business culture and the culture of your business and helping you align all your purchasing needs with your sustainable values. Proactive chemical management leads to long-term benefits for the business, for your business sector, for the community, and certainly for the planet. So I think really the bottom line in our discussion today is, does your business have a company-wide environmental or sustainability policy? And does it address procurement and in-depth supply chain information? And most important for us today, does it include toxic chemicals? And that would be the life cycle, really, of those chemicals, from manufacture to use to disposal. I want to very briefly give you a couple of business stories, but I realized, Danny, when you showed that picture, I might have gone to some of your members. I could have gone right to them to be able to present here. But what I did do was I did a larger search, because what I was looking for is finding a company that has a written policy on sustainability that specifically calls out or just about calls out avoidance of harmful chemicals in its operations and in its products. There are a lot of companies out there that make products that would qualify as sustainable and be appropriate for your green procurement policy, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're actually practicing sustainability within the company itself. And so that's what I was looking for here, because toxic chemicals, while being such a gigantic subject, are often neglected in terms of the everyday aspects of running a business. So I chose this company. This is a local to New York City company, Blue Marble Ice Cream, and I see you have an ice cream company too. Everything they do is organic, but I thought what was really interesting about that is that when they tell their story in their materials, they talk about how those values trickle through to all aspects of their business. So it's not only the ingredients being organic, but they also are very careful about the materials they use in their stores. So this is a manufacturer and a retailer. They use only non-toxic building materials. Their finishes are low zero or VOC. And of course they use energy efficient appliances. But they also happen to be a B corporation, which of course is a whole other story and would be a great program if you haven't done that, which is B corporations are for-profit companies that are certified to meet the standards, the highest standards of social and environmental performance and accountability and transparency. B Corp provides a free B impact assessment tool for any business to use, so you can sort of monitor yourself even if you don't become a B Corp. And that's true with a lot of the tools, and on our resources, in our resources file that we have for everybody, and that will also be on our website, you'll be able to find a bunch of other tools for providing guidance, including the listing for Westchester Green Business. Hackensack University Medical Center is, of course, it's a gigantic institution, and I do see that you have some healthcare institutions as your members as well. What's really interesting here is that two things. One is that they're using their scientific research to base their in-house toxic chemical policy. And they're also very outspoken advocates and have been very involved in the updating the regulations, the regulatory area of toxic chemicals. They really embody their mission and role as a healthcare institution. And then lastly is Badger. Badger is a personal, it's like a body care product, and body care products and remedies. They're in national distributions. It's a New Hampshire company. I love they have a slogan on their website: healing products, healthy business, make a difference. They consistently evaluate the sustainability of all their suppliers and work very, very closely with them. And on their list, on their website, they provide a list of common personal care ingredients that they recommend you avoid. And they say you'll never find any of these in our products. So now I want to have Bobby come up and tell you about what are some of those things that they're probably avoiding and keeping away from their customers. So thank you.
I'm really terrible with using mics on stands because of my height, so hopefully this will work. I'm Bobby Wilding. I am the Deputy Director of Clean and Healthy New York. As Hillary said, I've been doing environmental health advocacy for the past 20 years. Clean and Healthy New York just recently celebrated our 10th anniversary, and I'm one of the co-founders of our organization along with our Executive Director. And our organization was founded with a mission to promote safer chemicals, a sustainable economy, and a healthier world, because we believe that we really need the market to be engaged in transforming the materials that we're using in order to safeguard our health and the planet. And so we focus on catalyzing sustainable market shifts. We've got a campaign called Getting Ready for Baby that's a national campaign aimed at working with the retailers selling baby products to make sure that they're choosing safer materials and screening out harmful chemicals in the products they put on their shelves. We advocate for pollution prevention policies. We were one of the leading organizations here in Westchester County that advocated for a law restricting heavy metals in children's products sold in the county, along with other counties, and have worked at the state and national level as well on things including the reform of the Toxic Substances Control Act at the federal level, and also on restrictions on specific chemicals in specific products in New York State. We also train child care providers and nurses because we really believe that, particularly with a focus on children's exposure, child care settings are really critical spaces to be looking at, and that child care providers can be partners in advancing safer environments and healthier materials in children's daily lives. And we also produce a number of reports. So we've done testing of chemicals in products, in people. We release those results. We identify when businesses are leading, and we identify when businesses are lagging behind, because oftentimes it's that kind of spotlight that prompts people to do the self-evaluation and change. We've been involved and led 2 statewide environmental health and economy symposia. The last one was in 2011. We're hoping that we can pull another one together, because I think a lot has changed in the last 6 years in the landscape across New York State. So I'm going to go through a number of different sort of health outcomes and health endpoints that really illustrate why it is that our organization believes that we need to change the materials that are in our daily lives and in the materials we're using. So we're going to start just with carcinogens. Obviously, they cause cancer. But there are 120 known carcinogens and a number of other carcinogens. But as Hillary mentioned at the top of the conversation, there are 80,000 chemicals in commerce. And I was talking with a company that does certifications, and they've now, working with a number of manufacturers, built a database of 10,000, and they're a 2-year-old company. So in terms of screening the chemicals in the products that their manufacturers they're evaluating, they've come up with 10,000 already. And so this list does not include the vast majority of chemicals on the marketplace. They have not been fully screened for carcinogenicity. And so there's a variety of outcomes that come from carcinogens, and we find them in all sorts of places. Vinyl chloride. If you buy something made out of PVC, that process required the production of vinyl chloride, a known carcinogen. So it's something that is critical as you're making decisions. You have impacts both up your supply chain and also in the disposal. So, that slide got put in front of this one. There we go. This is the overview slide that I was hoping was here. So chemicals of concern, right? 80,000 chemicals in commerce. The vast majority are not well studied, and there are a number of endpoints that we're concerned about, and some of those endpoints, like endocrine disruption, are really relatively new in the scientific arena. And so we don't have the full data that we would need in order to be able to come up with a full list of just use all these chemicals and you'll be fine. But that process is ongoing. So there's a strong connection between health impacts and over 2,000 chemicals. And when you aggregate lists of authoritative scientific lists for those health outcomes, you end up with more than 2,000 chemicals. And there are known harmful chemicals in everyday consumer products and in things, building materials and supplies that you would be using in your business every day. And there are a few policies that require their disclosure. So I was talking with some folks before we started about personal care products, right? And there's a fair amount of disclosure about personal care products, with the exception of fragrances, in terms of what's in the bottle. Cleaning products will soon be required to disclose the ingredients in their products based on both California law and the implementation of a New York State policy and regulation. But if you go to buy a rattle for your niece, right? You look at that container, that packaging, and you don't know what that plastic is. You don't know what those different components are made out of. You have no information. And so we're routinely exposed to chemicals of concern without our knowledge or consent. So I referenced endocrine disruptors before. This is a relatively new area of study and has really gained a lot of attention. because essentially endocrine disruptors hack gene expression. So they change the way our body turns on or off the genes in our DNA. And so they can have impacts on puberty, on our ability to reproduce. This is true for both men and women. There are now chemicals that are being called obesogens, that when you are exposed to these chemicals at critical windows of development, it changes how many fat cells your body will produce or how large they will get. And so it is a critical component to looking at the obesity crisis in America, that it's not just diet and exercise, and they've done studies where they've found that people who have the same diet and exercise regimes but have different levels of these chemicals in their bodies or have had them in the past have different outcomes in terms of their size. Immune system function, for example, perfluorinated chemicals have been shown to reduce the efficacy of vaccinations. Mental health, there's a number of chemicals that have been shown to connect to increased aggression, decreased ability to sort of manage your own emotions. They attack the heart and the bones, and they can impact neurological development. And so this is a big area for endocrine disruption, is the concerns about their connection to the rising rates of learning and developmental disabilities. So some examples of endocrine disruptors include the fully banned PCBs and dioxins, which are a byproduct of burning a whole lot of different kinds of chemicals that are still on the market. Flame retardants, which are in things like the chairs that we're sitting in today, in curtains in commercial settings, in all of our cars, in car seats, in the housings of electronics. Pesticides that are obviously in our food, water, and soil. Perfluorinated chemicals, and actually I'm going to tell you the new wonky term is no longer PFCs. You're going to start hearing people talk about PFAS chemicals, which are per and polyfluorinated alkyl substances. And the reason that they're doing that is that as attention has been focused on PFOS and PFOA, which folks may have seen and heard talked about, which is an 8-carbon chain. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, and I don't have any pictures of chemicals in my presentation. But there's, you can tweak molecules and look for other things that aren't strictly within the definition of what a perfluorinated chemical is that still cause health problems or potentially cause health problems. And oftentimes they aren't studied, and so they're not on a list of that 2000. And so they enter into the marketplace without full data, and then we end up playing catch up again. So phthalates, which are used in vinyl and in fragrances, and bisphenols. A lot of folks have heard about bisphenol A. Our organization was one of the leaders in getting BPA banned in baby bottles and sippy cups. And some of the replacement chemicals were definitely steps in the right direction, and some of them essentially replicated the same problem. So products that are made with BPS instead of BPA also are being shown to be hormonally active, one of those endocrine disruptors. So neurotoxicants, why do we care? Well, there's a huge rise in children who have neurological challenges. They can cause lasting harm to the brain, and the results are difficulty in concentrating, speech, and they're lifelong impacts. So we see throughout our economy the ripple effects, right? Schools need to spend more money to have aids to help children who are struggling. We have workers who need to assist adults in functioning in their daily lives. And so there's a whole sort of ripple effect throughout both the healthcare system and also our broader economy with the rise in neurological diseases. So some examples include, flame retardants. You'll see it comes up a number of times. So it's a broad class of chemicals. Organophosphates and pesticides, combustion-related pollutants, mercury, lead, the banned PCBs, which are still in many of our bodies because they do not break down well. Other chemicals can be asthmagens. So obviously these cause breathing problems and have a huge impact on worker performance, because if you're sick or your child is sick with asthma, and this is a really prevalent problem, it can have huge impacts on missed days of work, missed days of school. And so there are, it can basically limit your ability to reach your full potential. And so asthmagens and asthma triggers include phthalates, chlorine, some essential oils, including limonene and pinene, and latex. And just finally thinking about the environment, aquatic toxicity, in terms of the impact on wildlife and fish. There are a number of chemicals that end up into our environment: pesticides, nanophenols, PCBs, all of those sort of old chemicals, metals, and polyaromatic hydrocarbons. And we care because they can concentrate up the food chain, and they can disrupt the food, our food web. And oftentimes they also are sort of overlap with hormone disruption and other defects. So our organization often runs into a situation where we're talking about hazards. So I'm talking to you about the chemicals and the impacts that they have. And a lot of times the framework that has been used when talking about chemicals has to do with risk. The reason that our organization and many like ours have been focused on addressing hazards and reducing hazards is because risk assessment has a lot of potential opportunities to be gamed. And if you're not assuming the most sensitive endpoint, you may end up being making decisions thinking that you're choosing something that's safe without really actually accomplishing that. And because we have information about a number of the chemicals that I've talked about briefly, it's really about focusing on eliminating that hazard, because the other piece of this is that when people do risk assessments, they're looking at the use primarily. And there are impacts throughout the supply chain going back to the original chemical production, and there are impacts on disposal that don't necessarily get folded into those risk calculations. And there's also been a lot of new evidence that there are synergistic effects between chemicals, and those aren't always being calculated when you look at one chemical at a time. So we definitely advocate for looking at exposure to identify some of the biggest opportunities for change, but to take in terms of a problem-solving solution a hazard reduction instead of focusing on a risk reduction. I know a lot of the focus of billing this was about procurement, but whether you are making a product or you're buying products for your facility, there are a lot of really common pieces here. So if you're making or selling products, there's a whole body of work of sort of compiling restricted substances lists. And I was at a meeting in Boston this week with businesses and NGOs in the Biz NGO work group for safer chemicals and sustainable materials. And we were having really rich and robust conversations about what does it mean to develop a list of chemicals to avoid. Right? That's what a restricted substances list means. And is that really actually getting you where you want to go? One of the presenters made the argument that looking at restricted substances list is sort of like looking in the rearview mirror, because that's what we already know is problematic, rather than looking ahead to choosing inherently safer materials. However, understanding that you want to avoid particular chemicals is an excellent start. And this is something that you can do whether you are making products or to use as a screen when you're thinking about the products that you're going to buy. You can think about, if you're providing services, thinking about the goods that you do use and what you recommend to others. So in terms of building a restricted substances list, there are a number of places where you can go to find materials. And I'm really going to I'm going to talk to you much more about the Chemical Footprint Project, because it's a really great diagnostic tool that more and more companies are using. But the Biz NGO work group is an excellent source for information. The Interstate Chemicals Clearinghouse has compiled lists of lists. A lot of companies are doing that. And in addition to this, there are a number of companies that, for a relatively low fee, will offer things where you can basically input all of the chemicals that you're interested in getting information about, and they'll give you like assessments of the hazard of those chemicals where it's known. Can we pass out the pieces? Because in the packets that you're going to get today, there's a much more in-depth set of resources for you that will go into giving you the links to all of these places and some more descriptions about them. So companies that have done restricted substances lists include Walmart, who recently announced that they had made dramatic reductions in the top 10 chemicals that they focused on. They've now done, you think a lot about greenhouse gas footprints, right, and energy footprints and water footprints. And this is a new approach to thinking about the chemicals that are in the products that you use or make. And the Chemical Footprint Project has been used by retailers to assess what they're bringing through their store to sell. It's been used, there was a case study that was released this week that was a pediatric unit where they looked at some of the key products being used in a pediatric room and assessed the chemical footprint of those products. It can be used to scope your entire company. You can use it in a lot of different ways to really understand where the chemical hazards are and then benchmark your change, just the way that a greenhouse gas footprint lets you sort of, get the big picture now and sort of mark your change as you go forward. So when you're thinking about certification programs in terms of products, there's really 3 different kinds. And the first kind is the self-certifications. And consumers tend to be, and advocates like myself tend to be skeptical of claims that you make about your company by yourself. Because you get to set the standard to accommodate whatever your business model is. Second-party certification programs are sort of a step outside of that, but those are certifications that are run by trade associations. So an example of that is there's a certification for foam that's called CertiPure, and it lists chemicals that are not present in the foam that's certified as CertiPure. It's run by the Polyurethane Foam Manufacturers Association, and some of the chemicals that are on that list are things that were never in foam to begin with, and don't necessarily go as far as other certifications would. And then there are third-party certifications, and those are run by separate nonprofits and also government agencies. And there's a whole wide variety. There are third-party certification programs where you basically say, hey, we did this, and they send you a logo that you can use. And then there are really intense certification programs, including one that's based here out of Westchester County called Made Safe, which is a new certification program that's come out in the last couple of years, where they do a full analysis of the chemicals in the products that people are using and have a very robust set of chemicals to avoid, and making sure that the chemicals that are being used are inherently safer. And they've certified, I'm trying to think of how many companies they've now certified, but it's rapidly growing. So you have to sort of, when you're thinking about your purchasing decisions, understanding those certification programs when you're looking at them is really important, because just because something has a green leaf doesn't necessarily tell you that it's actually preferable. And there's been a lot of work at the Federal Trade Commission to crack down on greenwashing, but it's ongoing. And so as you're thinking about the purchasing that you do, educating yourself on those certifications, and we have some of that information, but there are a lot of certification programs out there. I mean, there's a database of certification programs, and it's like hundreds and hundreds of certifications on environmental issues alone. And some of those are very narrow, and some of them are very broad, and it's important to understand what those are and what they mean when you're choosing them. So first-party certifications come and go. I used to have some examples of those first-party certifications that aren't around anymore because the FTC cracked down on those companies. There's a Sustainable Forestry Initiative, which is the forestry industry's standard, versus the Forestry Stewardship Council, and when you're looking at standards for recycled paper or sustainable forest sourcing. Third parties certifications that we've looked at include Green Guard and Ecotex. Everyone I know pronounces this standard differently. Ecotex is for textiles. There's a number of organic certifications. The Global Organic standard is now available for things that aren't food. And then there's obviously LEED, like the certification for this building, Green Seal, USDA Organic, and all of those are third-party certifications. So there's a new focus on chemical classes that goes beyond just those individual chemicals. So I told you that we worked on advocating for a ban of BPA in baby bottles and sippy cups. And that there was sort of this regrettable substitution of companies saying, okay, well, we're not using that. They go back to their supplier and they say, what can I use? And BPS is still on the list. And so there's an effort to talk about what kind of classes should we be avoiding in the materials that we're using. Highly fluorinated chemicals, those PFAS chemicals I was talking about, avoiding antimicrobials, including triclosan and triclocarbon, flame retardant chemicals, particularly those that are organohalogens. The Consumer Product Safety Commission this fall came out with a determination approving a petition from a number of organizations where they issued a warning to consumers about organohalogen flame retardants in children's products, in bedding, in electronics, and in furniture. And they are moving forward with actual policy around that. But it's clear that there are a lot of areas where flame retardant chemicals were added, and that's a whole story in and of itself, where they weren't actually needed to prevent fires. And so there are a lot of places where products don't need to include flame retardants in order to make sure that people are safe and aren't going to die in fires. And the reason we care is because those flame retardants come out of the products over time and get into our bodies. And we can actually track the way that that happens, and we can track the impact that it has on our health. So bisphenols and phthalates, those are largely the ones that act like endocrine disruptors. So they act like hormones in our bodies. This is the area that's kind of staggering and people have a hard time thinking about. These endocrine disruptors act at parts per trillion. And I've heard lots of chemical industry PowerPoints and presentations where they talk about that's one drop of water in so many tanks of, railway tanks, or so many pancakes in a stack of pancakes to the moon. But the fact of the matter is, Viagra operates at parts per trillion in your body. Pharmaceuticals are intended to function at those thresholds, so it's no surprise that there are biologically active chemicals in other products that are getting into our bodies and acting at that threshold. It does not take very many molecules of these chemicals in our bodies to have the impact where we see health outcomes. And so looking at bisphenols and phthalates as classes rather than as individual chemicals becomes really important. There are groups of solvents and heavy metals that are being grouped together. And really the purpose here is all of this is really technically dense, and I could have thrown those 2,000 chemicals at you, right? What we want to see businesses do is figure out how they just move to the safer materials. So you're not having to constantly reformulate as new evidence comes out about that one slightly tweaked molecule, right? So you're making choices about what is in the products that you're making or purchasing that move toward the inherently safer materials and aren't just sort of like replicating this process over and over and over again of discovering that the chemical that's just very structurally similar but not yet regulated is in fact problematic, because we've seen that time and time again as changes have been made in the marketplace. So we're hoping to help companies jump over the chemicals that we don't have enough data but have reason to be suspicious and into inherently safer materials. So there are a number of organizations in addition to the Westchester Green Business certification that can help your company. The New York State Pollution Prevention Institute is based at the Rochester Institute of Technology, but they function statewide. And they can do a bunch of different things for your business. So if you've got a new product that you want to demonstrate is really as green as you say, so you can bring it out into the marketplace, they have a green technology accelerator. They can come into your company when you've got a problem and actually help you diagnose the problem and explore solutions. They can help think about what your supply chain is. They really have a wide range of resources, and they're always interested in finding new businesses to work with. The Interstate Chemicals Clearinghouse is a multi-state and jurisdictional and tribal collaborative of 10 states and a bunch of other like cities, counties, tribes. And they have databases that give you information. So in terms of, these are kind of wonky, but so green screens, it's a tool for screening chemicals, and it gives you a bunch of different hazard outputs and a score. A benchmark 1 chemical is the one to avoid. A benchmark 2 is bad, but you can use it and look for safer solutions. And a benchmark 4 is we know they're inherently safer. 3 is sort of in the middle with insufficient data. So they've got a database of the freely available assessments of different chemicals. They have alternatives assessment guides, so if you're trying to figure out how do I find a safer product or safer material, they have materials there. And there are additional materials that are available to members. And while it's primarily a government organization, businesses can also join if they agree with the policy or the mission of the Interstate Chemicals Clearinghouse, and NGOs like Clean and Healthy New York are part of it. So New York State has an Executive Order 4 that is focused on green procurement. And this is where I think there are a lot of tools that you can use because they've issued specifications. And so if you're looking for, oh geez, what kind of printer ink should I really be sourcing? The New York State Department of Environmental Conservation and Office of General Services has already come up with specifications for products that they're using for the purchasing from the state. So you can both use that if you're making those kinds of products to check and see whether or not you would meet their specification, but you can also just use those specifications in your business as the specification you want to seek for finding the safer materials and products. They have done more than 20 specifications now, and they cover a really wide range of things. They're currently working on a specification for a revised specification on single-use food containers, because there's been this recent sort of revelation that perfluorinated compounds are being used in compostable materials and then ending up in the compost, ending up being spread on the land and coming back into our food supply and getting into our groundwater. And so they're revising their specification to actually look for solutions that are PFAS-free. I'm still trying to learn that language myself, and also compostable. And that's actually a challenge, and the fact that the state and other states were looking at this has driven companies to try do new research and development to find solutions. So that link, so you can find the green criteria, and you can find out whether your products are compliant, and that link is also in the resources page that I gave you. And so let's keep going. So just an example, the furniture specification that just came out says you have to use less than 1% polyvinyl chloride, you can't have any intentional lead, you need to avoid PFAS chemicals, although they're still calling them PFCs, and you have to measure to comply with the formaldehyde emissions. It has to be free of added antimicrobials, and needs to be free of certain phthalates, and to avoid organohalogen flame retardants. So that's an example of the kind of things that are embedded in those greens purchasing specifications. Another example is the packaging. So it has to, the packaging has to comply with the toxics in packaging law that covers cadmium, mercury, hexavalent chromium, and lead. And there's a tentative program to address styrene, chlorine, and PFAS. So the Chemical Footprint Project, I think, is the most interesting new tool that's out there. And it really is you can see there's all these little benzenes making up the footprint. But it's really intended to give companies metrics that you can measure against. And has like a 20-question framework. So it measures the overall corporate chemicals management. It's talking about the management policy, so how it's looked at from the top level down, inventorying chemicals, measuring the footprint, and then talking about how you talk about it to the public. One of the things that came up at the Biz NGO work group was the fact that it was S.C. Johnson that was up at the podium, and they were talking about how now they want to do full disclosure because even if consumers never go to their website and read their ingredients, consumers want to know that they could, right? So there's a new push for, not just the forensic consumers, but it builds trust with the consumer when you can say, you want to know what's in our products, it's all open to you. And there's certainly questions of confidential business information, but more and more there is a pressure from consumers for, I've heard some businesses call it radical transparency. And that making your information available becomes a really huge piece of what consumers are looking for trust. And part of it is because a lot of this has been kind of a black box for consumers. They don't really know what's in products. And they have found, oh, I thought I was buying the right thing by buying this thing that was labeled BPA free, but now you're telling me it's problematic. That kind of radical transparency allows consumers to make their own informed choices, and it definitely increases consumer trust. So that's where the public discourse and verification becomes really important. Yes, information about the chemical footprint project is in there. And as I said, they just released, so they've released surveys that companies were allowing to make public the chemical footprint from 2016 and 2017. And they've done a lot of really interesting looks at sort of what the impact has been for those companies. And it's really worth taking a look from your business perspective on what chemical footprinting would mean for you. And they did, on Tuesday while we were there, release a new report where they looked at that pediatric unit and what are the chemicals of concern in the products in the pediatric unit, and looked for where those opportunities for change were. Coming down the pike, the New York State DEC is going to require cleaning product manufacturers to post full information about ingredients on their websites, and they're going to require disclosure of whether or not those ingredients are on authoritative lists of chemicals of concern, and the guidance lists what those lists are, which would be a great place, and actually in the packet, or is it online, Hillary, the list of lists. Okay, so you can go online after this to the New York Sustainable Business Council's website and get that list of lists. Okay, great. So this is coming. This disclosure is going to start in 2019, and New York State is looking at what other kinds of products they might be wanting to require similar ingredient disclosure for. But this is definitely going to be part of creating the national model for what disclosure looks like in conjunction with what's going on in California. So that's pretty much what I have to cover. I will say also that I know there are some businesses here that are part of the healthcare industry. There is a group purchasing organization called the Green Health Exchange that was started by folks who wanted to make sure that the best and the most sustainable products were actually reaching hospitals, and that they could get group purchasing prices for those products. And so Green Health Exchange is a membership organization, but it's essentially its own GPO, and you do not have to be a healthcare institution to use it, but they focus on products that healthcare institutions are demanding. And they've already done the work to screen out chemicals of concern, so the whole, that whole catalog of offerings is inherently safer materials. And so if you're looking for solutions, that's one of those that's out there that may be useful for your business, whether or not you're a healthcare institution. That's also on our resources list. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Hillary to talk about, wrap things up and talk about our survey.
Thank you, Bobby. These are some excerpt questions from the survey. The survey is really quick. I think there are about 12 items on it. If you got a separate handout, it's a double page, but only one of those pages are necessary. We'd really appreciate it if you could fill it out now and give it back to us as you're leaving the room. It's really important for us for a couple of reasons, but really the most important thing is for us to figure out what we should do next after this introductory exploration with this particular focus. So we're really open to ideas and hope that you'll share some of yours with us. And then lastly, just a little bit more detail about our resources. Bobby and I both spent a lot of time on this. These are going to be available also online with even a larger list that we're going to keep updating. But one of the things that I think is really important is that there are a number of ways to support your search for becoming more sustainable in your purchasing in general, and also with this specific focus on toxic chemicals. But I also found that, for example, you'll see under purchasing resources that there are other buying opportunities like the one that Bobby just mentioned, which are basically buying groups, whether that are not necessarily healthcare oriented, but where the group has already made the really, really important decisions about toxic chemicals, and groups that you can trust, and we've listed a couple of them on there. I think really the most important thing is to really be ready to make the commitment to call out toxic chemicals as part of your green purchasing policy. And you'll really stand out, and I think you'll be really glad that you do that. So thank you very much. And now we have times for questions. Yeah.
So the question is about how particularly the fragrance and flavor industries have responded to the question of disclosure. I think that there's been a real change in understanding of what's needed from the fragrance industry in particular over time. And, we know that right now many companies that purchase fragrances don't know what's in that fragrance, right? They don't even know. And even sometimes when certification programs are assessing them, they have to get the information separately from the fragrance house. But I think that's shifting because really the need for transparency has overtaken that industry. And so the dynamics in California and New York were different because ours is implementation of an old regulation. In California, they were crafting new law, but they were definitely part of those conversations. And it's coming. I think those boxes are going to be open. Already, companies are posting the palettes of the chemicals that they're using. S.C. Johnson, in particular, talked about how they have a list of 4,600 chemicals that they track as chemicals of concern. About half of them are ones they seek to avoid, and the other half are sort of that list of, we don't really have enough information, we've got reason to be suspicious. And then interestingly also about them, they have been defining what are their green chemicals. And I think that's really the direction that companies are going to need to go, is to understand what is it that's inherently safer to meet the needs. And the solutions aren't all out there, right? Companies right now are trying to find the fluorinated-free stain resistor, right? They're trying to find the ways to meet consumer interests or materials interests without those chemicals, but having those frameworks for conversation is really important, and I think that we're going to see more transparency so that people can actually understand what we're dealing with.
I have a quick question about the flame retardants. I remember 9 years ago when I was buying mattresses for my children, it was impossible in this country to find baby mattresses that do not include those chemicals, which when peed upon release other noxious gases and whatnot. So I actually had to import my mattress from Canada, and find it organic, or Germany or somewhere. My wife is German, and she was horrified that we're even allowing those chemicals on mattresses. Is that changing, or do we know what the status is of that right now?
Yeah, that's definitely changed. In 2011, Clean and Healthy New York did an assessment of the crib mattress manufacturers across the country, and there were really only 2 that avoided all of the chemicals we thought they ought to be avoiding. One was Naturepedic, and the other was White Lotus. And since then, the industry has really shifted a lot. And so they're not all as far along as we think they should be. But the mattress industry is one of those places people care a lot about what they sleep on. Yeah. And there's a lot of mattresses being sold. I don't know why. Like, I have a mattress that I bought 20 years ago. Like, I'm not quite sure where this like repeated demand for mattresses is coming from, but there are definitely. I mean, it's not all the way there though, and so there's still effort, and that's part of the reason why the Consumer Product Safety Commission issued their warning about bedding, because they had been told by leading mattress manufacturers, oh no, there are no flame retardants, but then testing found it in some other companies, and so this is where it's really important to have that information. And when it comes to furniture, California passed a law that requires that there be a tag on furniture, and you can find it here in New York as well, that indicates whether or not it contains any added flame retardants or not. And colleagues of ours have done testing, and I can tell you, if companies are saying there are no flame retardants in that product, there are no flame retardants in that product. So that's a really good tool in terms of flame retardants in furniture, but it's not moved over to mattresses. So
it's almost like the non-GMO certified label or something like that. Because I know, like, even like kids' PJs, you know, my mom got, you know, PJs have flame retardants in them.
Right.
You know, it's just incredible.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, with all these efforts, has anyone gone after Consumer Reports down the road in Yonkers to get them to incorporate this toxic chemicals, safer chemicals, into their product ratings? Their magazines are very educational in connecting products and public health, but it hasn't made it into the mainstream product ratings that people use to make decisions. And I know that it's not easy for them to do, but if they could or would do that, it would have a big impact. I wonder what your comments would be.
I haven't had a whole lot of conversations myself with consumers unions since their toxicologist left the organization. I think they actually have moved away from this more than toward it in recent years, unfortunately. But it would be a huge boon to actually getting that information out to the public, because, you know, when it comes to their other kinds of testing, they are incredibly rigorous, but they haven't been evaluating chemicals as far as I know.
I feel like a lot of people are very interested in doing the right thing and being responsible, but it's hard because you have to find, you know, and research the toxic chemicals and everything. Does your website provide, maybe just dummy it up for people like, you know, myself and others, to say, you know, this is the good list, this is the bad list. Buy from these companies, don't buy from these companies. You know?
We're working on that, and that's what a lot of those certifications are attempting to do. Clean and Healthy New York does not want to become a certifying organization ourselves. But I will say that from the certifications that are out there, Made Safe, based here in Westchester, really is the best in terms of doing a robust look at chemicals. And we're hoping that they'll be able to get more companies to come on board and get their products certified. But it's a real challenge, and it's a challenge for us. It's a challenge for me as a human being. I've got 2 kids. Thinking about how I find the products for them is really, it's a really challenge, you know. I've got a 12-year-old, and back in 2007, when we started seeing all of this information about lead in children's products, I had access to an X-ray fluorescence analyzer. It's like this handheld, looks like a price check gun, but you can actually detect elements. And I was like bringing it home and testing her stuff, and she would be like, "Mommy, can I have that? Does it have lead in it?" You know, but that's just the tip of the iceberg, unfortunately. And the public gets, I mean, the real challenge, I think, in terms of applying the right pressure from the consumer standpoint, is that the consumer gets educated about a chemical, and they understand that there's a problem, but they're not toxicologists. And so, like, I think when people see BPA and phthalate free on a label, they think it means non-toxic. And what a company means is literally there's no BPA or phthalates in there, right? Hopefully that's what they mean. But it doesn't actually mean that the product's non-toxic. And I think that that's where, like, these chemical footprint efforts to help companies really understand what's going on is important. But it's really a challenge. The Getting Ready for Baby campaign is currently trying to put together sort of a safe registry guide so that a new parent could actually figure out, okay, how do I get the safest material and what don't I need? Right? How do I say I can skip that crazy, you know, doodad so that I have more money to spend on the products that matter? But it's definitely There are databases like the Skin Deep database for personal care products that help understand individual products made with for putting on our skin. But it's really complicated, and it's complicated further by the fact that the supply chain has gotten so complicated. So once you have manufacturing in China, those supply chains get so bifurcated that companies themselves that want to do the right thing have a hard time getting the information all the way up, or they do testing and discover, oh, we put it into our policy, but it's not actually being followed by our subcontractor. And so that's the kind of work that's going on in the BizNGO work group, is to really try to solve these challenges and to look for the safer materials.
Yes. Hi, my name is Eliana. Wonderful presentation, by the way. Thank you. It's a follow-up on the last question. In my experience in the environmentally preferable purchasing side of policy and implementation, another challenge that comes up is once you decided what policy you will implement in your organization, how do you actually track? Especially because people do have good intentions, but there is so much confusion, and when there is the option of buying a I'm going to call it EPP product, mistakes can be made. So what is the best strategy that you recommend for an entity, an organization, a business, a company, to be able to monitor and track to see if their policy is actually working, and how much money from the organization has been going towards EPP products, if the cost associated with EPP purchasing has been perhaps beneficial? Do you have some thoughts on that?
So New York State does that for its own green purchasing program, and they put out a report every year. And I think that that's where those metrics become really valuable. If you're doing surveys every year to find out what different departments are doing to meet your green purchasing or your EPP standards, then you can start tracking it. And I think it's about asking those questions on a regular basis. I know that it's something where if you don't talk about it for a while, but you've got a set standard, then people are like, oh, well, I'll just go buy this thing that's a little bit cheaper. You get a new enthusiastic procurement agent, and they're like, hey, I just saved the company a whole bunch of money, but they did it by violating the overall policies. And I think that when you ask those questions, so when New York State goes and asks, how much have you reduced, and is able to show that, I think that those metrics are really valuable. And I think you see that with, like, I'm not an advertisement for SC Johnson, but they were the example that I saw a lot of detail on at this most recent meeting. They actually can show how they've switched to greener chemicals because they track it. And I think that that's really that's what becomes necessary, is asking those questions over again, and we're speaking back to your company. Here's how we're doing, right? So if you communicate it back out, the results of your findings, then you can build that kind of investment in achieving those metrics. But I work for a small nonprofit, so I'm not a systems management kind of person. Yep.
Related to that question, we'd like to change products to be safer, but at a cost-neutral, level. What resources are there for us to? So, say styrofoam. We serve about 750,000 meals, mostly on reusable dishware, but some are takeout, and we'd like to not use styrofoam. What's an easy resource for us to use to see what are the alternatives that are as effective in keeping food warm and not leaking, and at a comparable price?
Isn't there somebody in the room? Is Michael here? Do you want to say something?
So my company manufactures paper disposables, okay? Paper, towel, tissue, food service packaging. And we manufacture and make our finished goods from tree-free material. Sugarcane, wheat, bamboo, eucalyptus. We work with a lot of food service companies, and what we do is we do it as a program. So our goal is to convert it cost neutral or less I agree with Danny as far as styrofoam is concerned. You're probably, that is it's the least expensive. You probably will have to pay more. What we work to do is look at some of the other items that you're using, and because we're the manufacturer, help reduce the cost there to kind of have your whole program, so to speak, at as close to cost neutral as possible. So we can discuss further. Emerald brand.
A healing environment, and a safe environment for patients and obviously vulnerable populations. So do you have any specific examples of organizations that have been able to go like 100% green?
I don't know if I have an example of 100% green, but I will say that it's interesting. On the West Coast, there's a huge amount of investment in this issue. So Kaiser Permanente, Dignity Health, and others have really been focused in on this. Hackensack has taken some steps, but there are a lot of resources for healthcare institutions. I actually started my work almost 20 years ago with a campaign called Healthcare Without Harm. And in the years that have followed, they have built up a tremendous depth of knowledge on not only where the problems are, but also what the solutions are. And that's where Green Health Exchange comes from, so that there's actually a place that you can go to get the products that meet all of those hospital specifications, but are actually the more sustainable options.
Could you also talk a little bit about how the regulations are changing, sort of on the back end? On our end, there's the procurement side of, like I said, meeting regulation requirements while also trying to purchase the safest chemicals. But I know that there are things happening more so on the policy side that are also changing based on new data that's coming up. For example, the FDA banning triclosan. Are there any other things like that coming down the road that would help support our push for green chemicals?
I mean, I think there's always a lot of things coming down the road. It's a question really of how fast they come and whether or not they apply specifically to the healthcare industry or more broadly. I think that as you see more disclosure happening, companies are going to want to be moving away from some of those chemicals they don't really want to admit they have in their products, which will help. We definitely know that was part of the conversation in terms of implementation timelines for some of the disclosure policies. But I'm not an expert on what kind of policies would directly affect hospitals. But I do know that I and my colleagues are looking for both market solutions to get leaders to move, and then also policy solutions that help make sure that we're pulling up the folks from the bottom as those leaders make things mainstream.
I think we're ready to close, if there are no more questions. So I want to thank everybody for coming, and I especially want to thank Danny and Scott for taking such good care of us and getting this together. And I also hope that in your packet you'll see that there's information about both of our organizations, and we'd love any of you business leaders to consider supporting and becoming part of the New York Sustainable Business Council. I think that our focus on policy really differentiates us from your group meeting here today, and we'd love to work with you. So thank you all very much.